Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Get over it!
Danger ahead. We are ruled by covert means. By the Illuminati.
A new world order.
These institutions. The Bilderberg Group. The Trilateral Commission. The Council on Foreign Relations. And secret societies. Like Skull and Bones. They control the corporations and the governments around the world. The Illuminati are not after money. It's power they seek. And the sport is international politics. The tools are war. Money mechanics, namely the debt-based fractional reserve system. Fear. The media including the music industry, news media, and mainstream press. This plot is so vast in scale, most people will refuse its existence. It is the magnitude of this conspiracy that makes it simultaneously the easiest one to spot, but the most difficult to believe. Once you choose to look, the more you will find. This is a very disturbing and unsettling process, as you will be challenging a lifetime of belief and dogma. One of the things we can all fight and do something about is Agenda 21, or as it was renamed, Sustainable Development. Agenda 21 is a non-binding, voluntarily implemented action plan of the United Nations with regard to sustainable development. This is hard to believe, so do your own research. 1. Population reduction, soft kill technology, and food and medicine. EMF electromagnetic fields, smart meters, mobile phones and masts, dirty electricity, hydraulic fracturing or fracking. Fracking is so important because it will poison our drinking water, it will poison our air, it will poison our land. The agenda is to reduce the population and keep the remaining inhabitants of Earth in small prison, like cities. And we will go willingly to escape the devastated countryside. The Codex Alimentarius Commission is an intergovernmental body to implement the Joint Food Standards Program, which was established by a Food and Agriculture Organization in 1961. They have made natural herbal remedies illegal, and only GM alternatives are allowed. Pesticides, Monsanto and the decline of the bees. Corporations are starting the process of patenting the world's gene pool. They will end up owning nature. Herbicide-ready crops that resist weed killer and have built-in pesticides. What effect does this have on our bodies and immune system? Fluoride is a poisonous waste product of aluminium smelting, and it's deliberately put into our drinking water and toothpaste. All in the name of healthy teeth. Aspartame, the sugar alternative, rots holes in rats' brains. The smart grid is being sold to us as a means to use the world's resources in a more sustainable way. But this is a conspiracy at work again. They, the Illuminati, are using the love we have for our home against us. But we need to understand there is another agenda, and that is to first depopulate and then dominate. The tools are microchips. Companies worldwide have registered trillions of IP addresses. Which is strange, as there are only 7 billion people on Earth. Every product, pet and human being will have its own unique IP address. This is made possible with the invention of the RFID radio frequency identification chip, which is the same technology used by supermarkets to secure their products. CCTV infrastructure has spiraled out of control. Currently there is one CCTV camera for every 13 people in the UK. These cameras use sophisticated computer algorithms which track behavior and bring them to the attention of an operator when protocol is breached. This is only the beginning of the awakening. Welcome to the tip of the iceberg.
Perhaps the most startling thing that I can share with you is that all of the conspiracy theories that you've ever heard about one world government, about the UN takeover of the world, all of those conspiracies have now been laid to rest. There's nothing conspiratorial about it. It's all published.
President Obama signed an executive order that will seize greater power over food, fiber, and energy in our vast countryside area.
It was during that study in which I began to realize that this was not an effort to protect the environment, but an effort to control you and I.
The world is going more and more deeply into a general breakdown crisis, which would probably result in the elimination within a generation or two of 2/3 of the present level of the world's population.
President Obama signed an executive order that will seize greater power over food, fiber, and energy in our vast countryside areas. The president created the White House Rural Council to, quote, make sure we're working across government to strengthen rural communities and promote economic growth. Sounds great, but get this. The council involves a long list of the most powerful people in America. Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner, the Defense Secretary's on it, Attorney General Eric Holder, even the head of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. Why would Homeland Security be involved in exerting power and influence over the heartland? Why would the Defense Department be involved in promoting economic growth? The plan calls for the federal government to control almost every aspect of rural America. It'll also, quote, identify and facilitate economic opportunities associated with energy development, outdoor recreation, and other conservation-related activities. Really? When did hunting and fishing become associated with conservation-related activities? And by the way, what does that mean? The aims of the White House Rural Development Plan sound eerily similar to a UN plan called Agenda 21, where a central planning agency would be responsible for oversight into all areas of our lives, a one world order.
This is another demonstration of this administration's obsessive-compulsive government disorder. They've decided that government needs to seep in, and it's not just, you shouldn't just be worried if you're in the heartland. We should all be worried about this. This is government out of control. This is crazy. This is over the top. This is one of hundreds of sort of organizations and commissions and panels that this administration has created to wheedle their way into our lives on what kind of light bulbs we can use and how much broccoli we can eat and what we can drive and what our kids have to eat at school. And they're just seeking to control Tony, every area of our lives.
Certainly feels like overreach to me.
Not only overreach, Eric, I mean, it's so frightening. This is 16% of America, what's considered rural America, who basically is now going to have its entire livelihood run by government in Washington. Right. They're far away from Washington. They like it that way, is my guess. I think Mr. Ferguson certainly sounds like he's representing that point of view.
All of these things are designed to bring more and more control to bureaucracies rather than to the independent individual, the sovereign individual of this nation. What brought me into this whole discussion was the fact that while I was doing this multi-million-dollar research effort in the 1980s and early 1990s, I became aware of an agenda basically to lock up one half of the United States into wilderness corridors and reserves. What's called the Wildlands Project, but it was also a key cornerstone of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. It was during that study in which I began to realize that this was not an effort to protect the environment, but an effort to control you and I. They were dividing the United States up into little compartments, in which they would rip out roads, which they would rip out whole communities and put them back in the wilderness.
Now, for a long time, Agenda 21 was talked about as crazy kook conspiracy theory, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's like, is this Area 51 or, what is it? But it's, the days of calling it a conspiracy theory are over. It's definitely a conspiracy fact. And it is the plan to inventory and control all resources, both human and natural, all information, and all means of production in the world.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty far-reaching. Now, tell us, if you could, how you got involved with this, because Santa Rosa, California is where you live, right?
That's right. Yes, I was elected to a project area committee that was an oversight committee for a huge redevelopment project, about 1,300 acres going through the center of my city. And I thought I was going to be, sort of the insider person who was going to help everyone on the committee understand redevelopment and in eminent domain. But it turned out that my city had created this fraudulent project and hired a consultant that misrepresented the area. And so I ended up suing to stop this project. And through that journey of going through the lawsuit, we created a business association. We sued, we lost in Superior Court, and then we moved up to the appellate level where we lost. But during that 3-year fight, we were able to stop the project, and then the economy collapsed. So during that fight was when I recognized that redevelopment is a funding and implementation arm of United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development.
So when you talk about redevelopment, are you also speaking of urban renewal agencies that most practically every city in the country has, some form of a redevelopment or renewal agency?
Yes, that's right. That's the other term for it, urban renewal, but that's generally when you think of urban renewal, and I know that's what it's called in Oregon, but often it's considered to be federal, but this is state, it's local. You can end it in your state. And it is it's actually often misused, and what it's used for is to take your property tax dollars and subsidize private development. And in this case, the preferred development style is smart growth, which is not just a building style, but it's an ideology, and it is the preferred building style and design for United Nations Agenda 21.
What is smart growth? I mean, we've talked about it quite a bit, but, what do you see as the United Nations version of smart growth as contrasted with what? I mean, when we think of smart growth, we just think of something where, you're not causing too much trouble for people and, and various other...
I know, it's smart.
Right. You don't want to be dumb. You don't want dumb growth, right?
I know. How could you be against it? It's smart. They've definitely got the rhetoric going there. And I want to, first before we talk about that, I want to say, yes, this is a global plan. It was launched in the United Nations, but it's implemented locally. And the United States signed on to it in 1992. George H.W. Bush signed on to it, brought it back to the U.S., where Clinton created the President's Council on Sustainable Development in order to implement it in the United States. And even though, you'll hear, it's a 20-year-old plan, it's voluntary, it's nothing, it is, in fact, working right now in your town, no matter where you live. And smart growth is one of the things that it looks like. And that is ground floor retail built right to the edge of the sidewalk, 12 feet high, with 2 or more stories of residential above. And round in the back through an alley, you'll find parking for 1 car or less per unit. And this is often on a transit line or a proposed transit line. And the design is doesn't pencil out, and so it has to be subsidized mainly by either your transportation tax dollars or your property tax dollars. So this is a benefit to a private developer.
So you're building up rather than out. Yeah, I understand. What you're talking about. What you described right now sounds suspiciously like Portland, Oregon.
That's true. Portland, you'll find that in Portland. It's actually in the center of not just the large cities. Portland was one of the pilot cities along with Seattle. But you'll see it now in every small town. You'll see the same design style, and it, in fact, is part of the reason, or one of the contributors to the collapse of our economy, because it simply does not pencil out, and so it requires huge subsidies.
Now, why doesn't it pencil out? Because it sounds like if you're trying to get people less car-centric, that we're always told that is supposedly the common good, fewer car trips, and that we stay in a nice, dense urban corridor, as it were. Why is that not sustainable, though?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the word common good, because this is really the central
and by the way, I don't believe in the common good, but I'm saying that's how it's sold, okay? Just so you understand.
Well, the common good is, what we're told is that the individual's rights have to be balanced with the rights of the community. And, of course, the individual's rights are delineated in our Constitution, but the community's rights are not. You won't find those written anywhere. They can change at any time. So when you're being told that you're, essentially what's unsustainable, according to United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, is private homes, private vehicles, appliances, air conditioning, meat eating, tillage, many dams. You'll find many things that we, of course, take for granted in our country and expect to use.
You realize you just said the magic word around here when you said dams.
Dams, right.
Dams are not sustainable. Are you familiar with what we've been experiencing here in Southern Oregon and Northern California with the removal, the effort to remove the Klamath Basin dams?
Absolutely. Yes, that's right. And this is part of United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, certainly, because, oh my goodness, you might use that water. And, you were asking me, why is it that, that living supposedly sustainably, downtown in a condo above a store is bad. It's not bad. If you want to do that, go ahead and do it.
Right.
But the thing is that if you're asking me to use my property tax dollars for the next 30 to 45 years to pay a private developer to do it, then I say that is wrong. And the reason that they're doing it like that is because they want to, the plan is to move people out of the rural and suburban areas and move them into the center of cities. And I'm fully aware that this sounds crazy. The plan is definitely crazy, but I am not.
Rosa Koire.
That's what I'm...
Yeah. No, I don't think you're crazy at all, because you're just bringing forth more of what some various other issues and guests that, confirming what you have been talking about. Rosa Koire, once again. And by the way, what is the name of your book, the Green Mask, once again, or Behind the Green Mask?
It's called Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21, and it's available on Amazon. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely, you'll find this all across the country. So it's not, this is it's implemented locally, and you see it through regionalization, where you're finding that your government is transitioning to unelected boards and commissions that you have no impact on, that are making decisions for you.
So when we talk about regional governance, as an example, we talked about regional planning here, and it's been kind of stopped up as of late here because not all of the cities wanted to weigh in on it. But are you saying then, when you talk about regional problem solving, regional planning, this is all part of that same Agenda 21?
Mm-hmm. Up until recently, I worked for the Department of Transportation, and of course I understand that regionalization, certain things are regional. You don't want your road to end when you stop at the end of your county and there goes the end of your road. That doesn't work. Certain things should be regional. But what we're seeing now for the very first time is that your property tax dollars and your transportation tax dollars are going for a plan that is regional, but it is conflating housing and transportation for the first time. So if your town or county wants to get transportation tax dollars, they have to build smart growth. And this is something entirely new. It's actually social engineering, and it's a restriction on your ability to use those lands in the suburban and rural areas. And you have to ask, where is your food going to come from? If roads and services are not maintained to the suburban and rural areas. And this is a plan to actually shift ownership from private hands into public hands, and then to take those lands out of production and remove them and transform them into wildlands.
You know, Rosa, this is sounding very much like, for all intents and purposes, anti-human green communism.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I'm a liberal Democrat. I know that some people, find that hard to believe, but I have been a Democrat since 1974, and I think that the environmental movement has been hijacked. And a lot of people are starting to recognize this and joining me in saying that, you know, regardless of our political affiliation, we need to speak out and call a halt to this, because we're finding that our form of government is being changed.
Now, Rosa, you being a Democrat, it means that you come from this from a very interesting path. So when you talk with your fellow Democratic Party memberships, I mean, how do you actually get them to understand that green or sustainable does not equal good? I mean, how do you actually convince them of this?
Well, you know, it's really not that hard once if you're able to just sit quietly and listen for a minute, you know, and that's hard for people because, you know, it's an emotional issue and it has been created as an emotional issue. A lot of jargon. This is the biggest public relations scam in the history of the world, I think. But if you talk with people about smart meters, about genetically modified food, about domestic surveillance and the corporatocracy, this is all part of United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. And I think that those of us on the left can recognize it from that point of view. And certainly this is really a shift from, you know, when you're seeing that your public-private partnerships are actually directing government, and that is the corporations directing government and erasing the boundaries of, between town, county, state, and federal into megaregions. We now have 11 megaregions in the U.S., and these include part of Mexico and Canada.
What megaregion is Oregon part of? Is there one?
Yes, Cascadia.
Oh.
And it seems hard to believe, you know, you hear this stuff and you think, what is this, 1984? But it sort of is. So it's good to know about it because you don't want to be the last person to hear about this.
Okay, so here we are in Southern Oregon, part of Greater Cascadia, as it were. So I find that interesting that you talk to the Democratic folks from the point of view of, hey, look at these food rules, look at this surveillance state, the panoptica, you know, as it were, and the control. You probably, I imagine, talk to those from the political right more from the point of view of property rights. Would that be fair to say? I mean, what point of view do you bring forward when you speak to those groups?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, you know, it's a funny thing because obviously, as you said, I'm a commercial real estate appraiser. I appraise shopping centers and office buildings, and of course, I own property myself, and so do a lot of people on the left. So I really don't know quite how the rhetoric has been shifted so that private property rights is now considered something that only people on the other end of the spectrum would consider important.
Yeah, it has been shifted, but yet I agree with you. This is something that you would think we would all be interested in.
Sure, and you know, when you think of this, we are ultimate private property. Our body is our private property, and those rights in our Constitution protect our property rights, and we are our property. So, of course, I discuss the Constitution, which is not a left-right thing. All of us are subject to it, and it in fact serves all of our individual rights. So that, of course, is a big one for people who are on the other end of the spectrum. For me, I really don't look at it as a right-left thing. It's not. This is an American issue, and all of us need to stand up and call a halt to it. But we first need to recognize what it is, because awareness is the first step in the resistance.
Yeah, I'm thinking very much the left-right paradigm in some cases has been created to keep us fighting at each other's throats rather than, hey, wait a minute, don't you see the bigger picture here? What's really going on? You keep us fighting over the standard left-right paradigm, and then pretty much you let the United Nations kind of style thinking take over, right?
You're absolutely right. And, when you go to one of those government meetings, it's a visioning meeting. When you get invited to that charrette or that workshop or that visioning meeting, you're invited to give your opinion. That, your opinion means absolutely nothing. This is the Delphi technique. It's a Rand Corporation technique that was developed in the 1960s, and it's being used on you by your government now. So, never has a group of people been so solicited for their opinion and so ignored in the history of the world. And this is what we're finding now in all of our government meetings, these meetings where we're invited for, public buy-in is what they're looking for. But in fact, what you're finding is that people who are speaking for you don't, in fact, actually speak for you, but they're given the power to speak for you in local groups. And this is one thing that all of us can come together and object to. This is a manipulation of every single American.
Rosa Koire here, Executive Director of the Post Sustainability Institute. Her book is Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21. It's available everywhere, including her website. She's going to be speaking at the Medford Library in the big main meeting room this coming Tuesday night at 6:30. I'm hoping you attend. Dawn, you had a question for her. Go right ahead on the Bill Myers Show.
Yes, I do. Our two states, Oregon and California, share the Siskiyous. Is the Siskiyous part of this? I heard you mention Cascadia, but I'd like to know about the Siskiyous too, and I'll just listen to your answer.
Sure, Dawn, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, actually, Cascadia doesn't quite get all the way down to the Siskiyous. If you go to, first of all, you should take a look at my website, which is called Democrats Against UN Agenda 21.com. Of course, I called it Democrats because so few Democrats are on, are aware of this, and I wanted to give that encouragement to people. But certainly, it's a nonpartisan site. The Siskiyous and what's happening with the dams, the removal of dams and actually removing people from the rural areas is what that's going to do and impact our food production. This makes us, the movement of people into the cities creates more dependence on your government and actually moves you out of areas where you can be independent. And when you're independent and not able to, it's not easy to surveil you out there, you're less controllable. And this ultimately, I hate to say it does sound crazy, but this really is, the plan is a totalitarian plan to control you. And I know this is going to ring true with you. You know something's wrong. This is what is wrong. This is the plan. And I think that when people recognize it, there's tons of documentation, and I have it for you. It's in my book. There's no question about it. And you need to understand what it is so that you can fight it.
Rosa Koire here one more time. And Susan, we have time for a quick call, a quick question. Go right ahead.
Yes, many counties seem to have groups that make what they call sustainability awards to different individuals or groups who have made contributions to, quote, the sustainability of their county. Would this movement be part of that Agenda 21?
Thank you, Susan.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you for that question. Yes, it is. I'm sorry to say that those of us who are being manipulated by, of course, awards, by people sitting on one another's boards, it doesn't take much for people to suspend their questioning ability when they're given an award. When you recognize that the sustainability movement is actually a hijacking of the environmental movement and a method to convince you through rhetoric that everything that you're doing is wrong. Now, I perfectly, of course, support conservation. I support conservation and all of the things that we want to do to keep our environment clean. That is not what this movement is about. This is the green mass, and behind that is totalitarian control.
Rosa Koire, it is such a pleasure meeting you, and I'm glad you're just raising people's eyelids and saying, "Hey, look." This has nothing to do with sustainability or it has everything to do with a control grid, really. It's what this sounds like.
That's right. And we all need to get together. We can fight it. I'm going all across the United States, and people are putting on their armor, suiting up, and fighting this everywhere.